today I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I need to drive towards that area that I went on the weekend. And on my way, I'm going to say this because in case they interfere with me, I'm going to stop by the federal court because I realized that maybe I need to change my tactic, you know. But I'll tell you what I'll do in a bit. So what I will do for this trip, I'm going to start using this time because it's time that I'm driving that I'm not doing anything, right? So to still be helpful, I will take the time that I'm driving to say the things that I've been meaning to say for a while, but I haven't had a chance to do a demo because all these opportunities that they're giving me, I mean the lawyers and the judges to learn about the law and the judiciary system. So because I've been so busy learning, I haven't been able to do one of these demos in like 10 days. So I have a bunch of things, right, that I've been meaning to say that happened recently and are kind of important. I mean, they're more like observational things, right, that happen on the ground. But there could be good tips, right? And if the DOJ or the DA is watching this spectacle, it could be helpful to catch them, right, in the act. So what I'll start doing is, as I'm driving every day to the court, to whatever court, right? Because now I have like 5 cases, right? So I have a case in the Supreme Court of Texas, 1 case in the federal court, 2 cases in the 5th Court of Appeals, and 2 cases in the Fort Bend County Court, 3 cases, right? So in total, my number of legal trouble has exploded to like 7 cases in the last 7 months. And remember, before this point in my life, nobody has ever sued me, ever. Like, I've never had any legal dispute with anybody. Well, I think there was one tenant that was one of the network, right? Like they planned the tenant to harass me, right, with the tenant. He started playing loud music at 2 a.m. and I would get fines from the HOA, right? So I had to kick him out and he sued me. That was maybe like 6 years ago. That was the only instance, but besides that, I mean, it was a dispute for $1,000, right, for the security deposit. But besides that, right, ever in my life, I have never been sued until now, and now I have 7 cases, right? But anyhow, because they've given me this intensive training, right? I think that after this, I'm gonna try to see if I pass the bar, to be honest. Maybe, right? If I study a little bit, maybe I'll pass it. I don't know. Well, if they let me take a computer into the room, I'll destroy it. But anyhow, so I'll take this opportunity to, deliver these observations, right? So that's one thing that I'm going to do. But I think I'm also going to split it I'm also going to split it into, observations that I would normally give in a demo, and like ground observations like these ones that I see when with the software that I have, and the advantageous point of view that I have because all these people are following me, right, as I drive. I mean, so I'm gonna try not to mix them, right, because it adds noise to the two areas. Like those are 2 areas that are so distinct to each other that it just adds noise, right, if I talk about the 2 things in the same period of time. So I'm gonna try to split it by segments or something like that. So that's the idea. Oops. Yeah, see, for example, this man is obviously tracking me, right? It's a woman. It's a man? It's a woman? It's a man? No, it's a man. So he's just waiting there to tag me, right? It's obvious. and we're gonna look for the W vehicle. There it is, right? So, actually, this is interesting. This is not a W, but a single V. So I don't know. I'm not sure about this one. But let's see if we have another here hiding behind this. Not this one. Not that one. So maybe, let's see. So, so this would be demo 101, right? So I'm gonna start numbering it that way because this particular one at least, right? Because these observations are for that demo. But before I start that, I have to say that something strange happened, the last few days after I installed the infrared countermeasure, right, and I was able to detect the absence of the W, the whiskey vehicles. And after, once you know what you're looking for, you can see more clearly, right? So after that happened, right, I've been exchanging messages with the informant, and he asked me for this demo. Like, he asked me to do this demo, which is strange, right? Because the informant, like, usually he gives me information. Like, he doesn't ask me for, I think only one instance in the past he asked me to do something. But this time, like, he asked me for a demo, right? Specifically for this demo. Like, he told me, like, you've been meaning to do a demo for more than a week and you haven't done it. Please do it. So I don't know. I mean, he didn't tell me, right? I asked him and he didn't answer. But this made me think, and this is just me speculating, right? I might be completely wrong on this. But this made me think that maybe he's passing information to the FBI. Because, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like something that the informant would be interested in knowing. I mean, what I say in these demos, right? For multiple reasons. Like, they're too technical, they're about legal topics, they talk about lawyers and judges, and they're in English, right? Like, that's not his native language. I don't know, it just seemed unnatural to me that he asked me for this specific information, right? So it occurred to me that maybe he is an informant to the authorities, and maybe, he was sent to ask me that. I don't know. I'm speculating, of course. I have no way to know, but it's possible, right? It's possible. I'm saying this in case the judges are listening, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is that I'm getting feature requests, right? Like, like when you, or like, how do you call that in English? When you go to a concert and, the concert ends, the fat lady already sung, an encore, right? Like the public starts asking for more, right? Something like that. It's like an encore, right? So that was interesting, right? The other thing that was interesting was the conversation not the conversation, but like what I was saying yesterday at the end of the recording, right? I think it was the second recording of the day, when I was talking about, legal liability of people working for this network because of the tampering with the food in public places, right? Like in public stores, like Walmart. Like Walmart, H-E-B, Kroger, right? Specifically in the Katy area, and the presence of children in those stores when I've been there, right? Because I've seen the children. I'm not speculating that there might be children. I've seen them. Right? They've been next to me, so they've been in imminent danger, right? And authorities can check this on the cameras, right? It's not, they don't have to guess, like they can see the children. So I was talking about that, right? So when I was running, just a couple of hours ago, right? The informant told me that the coffee that I bought, apparently, right? This is what I understood from what he said. I think this is what he meant. I mean, it wasn't exact words, but you know, I can put two and two together. I think what he meant was that the coffee in the Kroger store that I bought on January 25th, after I added Greg Abbott to the book that I sent to the DOJ, that coffee was tampered with. I think that's what I got, right? That's the information. It's a tip, right? But this is interesting because I haven't drank that coffee. I have the coffee because, you know, like he already warned me that something might have been contaminated, right? But now this is interesting on itself because that coffee was not touched by the guy that was handling the bags, right? I mean, he touched it, but the coffee was sealed, right? So he could not have contaminated the contents of the jar of coffee, right? So this means that it had to be contaminated by the store, by the people that work in the store, or by the people that manufacture the coffee, right? It's the only, or that transport the coffee. I think those are the three ways to do it, right? But apparently it's the coffee, right? And I have the coffee in my possession under lock and with security cameras watching it. So, you know, I'm saying this so the judges can hear, right? Like, if this is the case, I mean, you should ask the Venezuelans, right? Like, if it was the coffee, because if it was the coffee, this puts you in an immense amount of legal risk, right? Because we're in Texas. We're not, you know, in any other place. We're in Texas, right? So I don't know. If I were you, I would ask the Venezuelans if it was the coffee, because this was the Venezuelans. I'm sure because I saw them. I saw the operatives, right, in the store. They were Venezuelans. And I know that because I was born in Venezuela. I know a Venezuelan when I see it. So I don't know. It might be a good idea to check with your Venezuelan contacts if it was the coffee, right? Because if it was the coffee, and I already know that it was the coffee, and I'm recording this, and this is gonna get into the book in 2 hours or 4 hours, right? And it's gonna be published. Eventually somebody's gonna look into the coffee, right? And I have the receipt of the store where I bought it, and you know, that book has a publication date. It can be proof that I published that 2 hours before I bought the coffee, right? And there were children, at least I saw that day, 3 children next to me while I was picking the coffee, right? So, you know, it's a dangerous situation, I would think, legally speaking, right? From what I've learned from you through all this journey of the last, 10 months. It seems to me like an explosive legal situation. So I would check. I would ask the Venezuelans if it was the coffee, right? Because if it was the coffee, maybe it's time to reassess, It's never too late until it's too late. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. There's a point when it becomes too late, and I think we're pretty close to that point, because if it's the coffee and I already know, you know what I'm going to do, right? Oh, and he mentioned the cornflakes as well. So that day I bought 3 boxes of cornflakes, the cereal, large boxes. He also mentioned the cornflakes. Now I don't recall if they were like, because cornflakes is a specific brand, right? But there's also like the no brand version of that. Kellogg's, right? I don't know if they were. I can't recall if they were Kellogg's or not, but I have the receipt. So the coffee and the cornflakes. right, so what I'm gonna do, right? I'm gonna go via Galveston during the weekend, but I'm going to stop by the federal court literally to beg Judge Hittner to reconsider. Like, I figured maybe I'm being too harsh, like maybe I'm not asking the right way. It's possible, right? I'm a pro se litigant, and it's possible that I don't know exactly how to ask, right? So I'm going to try something different. I'm going to be polite, and I'm going to beg. I'm going to beg for the judge to reconsider. And I'm going to also ask for a stay of that new harassment hearing that Phil Denning, using the HOA of Lake Point Estates and the law firm Roberts, Markel, Weinberg, Butler, Haley, PC, scheduled for February 12th, right? So now they're gonna drag me into court for an HOA issue, also seeking contempt. By the way, in demo D98, which I recorded, I think, I don't recall exactly the date, but it was like January, say 16, 17, 20, something like that, right? In that demo, I mentioned that the informant had told me that they were going to try to find me in contempt, or that they were already trying it, right? Which I said, it's a stretch because this is a company, right? And I showed on the camera the envelopes that I received from the law firm, this law firm that I'm describing, right? That has been harassing me in combination with Phil Denning for more than a year, almost a year and a half at this point. So I showed the envelope, and I showed in the camera that I had not opened it when I said this, right? I said, I got the information from the informant that they're going to try to find me in contempt to put me in jail for a minor HOA issue, right? Which is a stretch because it's a company. They have to put the company in jail, right? So anyhow, I haven't opened that letter because I'm not gonna engage with the harassers. Like, if they're gonna do that, they're gonna do it whatever I do, right? Like if I engage or not engage, they're gonna do, like, to give an example of what I mean, right? Do you think I want my son to be kidnapped for 10 months? Of course not, right? But if they want to do it, they will do it because they fully control the judges, right? So I know that I have no recourse against what happens. What happens is determined by them, by Diosdado Cabello and the judges that he controls, right? So I'm not gonna even waste energy on that. If they take that step to put me in jail, well, I guess I have to trust that somebody is watching this, right? Like the DOJ, the FBI, and they will be stopped and caught and put in jail, right? I mean, there's no other thing I can do, right? I'm not going to stop or change the outcome of this. In whatever way I act, it doesn't matter what I do. The outcome is not determined by my actions, it's determined by them, right? By Diosdado Cabello. So, I haven't opened the envelope, right? But 2 days ago, the informant told me open the envelope, right? And I've been meaning to do it, but I've been more busy, with the federal lawsuit and all that. So anyhow, I opened the envelope this morning, right? When I opened the envelope, surprise, surprise, exactly as the informant told me. They already have an order draft for contempt of court for $3,000 for a monetary demand of $3,000, and for the private property sign that I put on the lawn the day that Phil Denning trespassed the property lines and attacked me verbally. He started yelling at me. Now, of course, at that day, I didn't even know who he was. That was the first time I saw Phil Denning, right? I'm talking about July 2024. So here's an interceptor. Now you see how she's, or he's, maintaining the speed. The plate is Michael Victor Lima 5206, and it's a Nissan Rogue silver. And we are at the exit 755 northbound on I-10. So if anybody's, nearby, that's the guy. So anyhow, so Phil Denning that day, right? I haven't met him. I haven't even had any interaction with him. He came running towards my home, like, walking fast, the way he does, right? and he trespassed into the property, like into my front yard. And I told him this is private property, and he was yelling at me. Of course, I understand now, right? At that point, I didn't have the geo index. I didn't know who he was, but with everything that has happened in the last year and a half, I understand that his goal in that opportunity was to create an incident, like a physical altercation in which he could, either hit me or maybe provoke me into hitting him, and then put me in jail, right? Or sue me or whatever, right? So when he did that, my response to that the very same day was to go to Walmart and buy the private property sign, which is the root of this dispute, right? It's a small sign, 6x9. It's the size of a sheet of paper, and I put it in the front yard. And he sued me with the HOA for that, and fined me for $3,000. And then they are seeking enforcement, and because I'm not gonna pay for my own harassment, they are seeking. Well, they already have drafted an order for contempt, an order granting contempt. And they scheduled this new harassing hearing, which will be another opportunity for them to try to put me in jail. But and this is what I was saying yesterday, right? They don't know how to use power. That they just don't know, right? They keep abusing. Well, it could be that it's the only weapon they have, right? So they keep abusing it, right? What do you think is going to happen? It's going to happen the same thing that happened with the traffic citation, but worse, because the clerk of this court is already a defendant on a federal lawsuit. I'm going to ask the court to recuse itself. I'm going to get all the evidence against Greg Abbott into the record. It's going to be worse, right? So anyhow, but that's the setup they have, right? That's what they were thinking, right? So my goal today is go to federal court and literally beg Judge Hittner to reconsider. And I'm going to submit a motion for a temporary restraining order and a stay of this trial court to Judge Hittner, right? I'm going to ask him nicely. I'm literally going to beg him. By the way, Judge Hittner struck from the record the corrected Fourth Amendment complaint. So he did it again. And this is a complaint naming him, right? So this is the second time that he strokes a complaint that names him as a defendant. He denied his own motion to recuse and did not forward it to anybody. And he also denied the motion to change venue, right? So he basically saying, no, this case is not going anywhere, and I'm going to be the judge even if I'm the defendant. That's basically what he's saying, right? And I'm not going to issue the summonses, and I already gave you an ultimatum that if you don't serve anybody, I'm going to dismiss it, right? So I mean, I don't know. I don't know, like, I don't know. It feels childish, to be honest. Like, this is not gonna make it go away. But anyhow, so I'm gonna try to, to repair my relationship with Judge Hittner. And I'm going to ask nicely today. Like the tone of the motion is different. Like it's conciliatory, right? Maybe there is a way to work this out. Is what I'm thinking, right? And speaking of working out things, the informant also told me that these people are having a conversation about how to, what could possibly shut me up, right? I don't mean to interject or to intrude on your affairs. I'm talking to the network, right? But if I may offer a suggestion, I think the solution is Penelope. Penelope could shut me up. I guarantee you that. I'm sure. And I've been telling you this for a while, but you're not listening, right? I think the solution, the key of this problem is Penelope. I know it might sound like a little bit risky, but I think that's the key. That's the solution. I don't know. Think about it. All right. So let's do the items of demo 101. Okay, so this is a note I recorded this on January 29. And the note says that it was explaining why I changed the routes on when I go to pick up messages. It was because, and I think I mentioned this in a post, it was because the informant, again, told me that the network, Diosdado Cabello basically, is installing cameras in all the areas where where the antennas are. And he told me cameras and instruments, right? So they're putting instrumentation on, like, in the places where I go pick up the messages. So of course, I mean, at that point in time, it was mostly on the Bush Park, on the Katy side. I mean, near Kellywood, I think it's called, in that area, right? So they're putting cameras and antennas and instruments in that area. So of course I had to change the route, right? But this led to evolution. I evolved the system and the logistics pipeline, the logistics and planning pipeline, part of it. And now I do it differently, right? It's more secure now. So it actually helped me, right, that they did this. So that was the first item I had. Yeah, the second item, I would love to show you this on the screen, but I'll just mention it here. It's kind of a shadow banning that they're doing to my social media accounts on Twitter and TikTok. So the way it works is, if I create a post, and this is why I wanted to show you on the screen, right? Because I could demo this situation. But if I create a post on Twitter and I set it to public and everything, right? The post supposedly gets published. I can see it on my profile, right? And I can even pin it to the profile. But if I log into Twitter or log on to Twitter as using an incognito browser, and I go to my profile, the profile is empty. Like all my posts, they just don't show up, right? So it's like when I send an email and they make me believe that the email went out, but they don't really send it through Gmail, the same thing, right? So they're making me believe, or when I publish the books on Amazon and then they break the link, right? The books appear to be published, but then nobody can click on the link, right? It's the same technique. So it's a way to make the author of whatever it is, right? An email, a post, a book, believe that it went through, but it didn't. Like, it's not visible. But again, because they have done this so consistently, right? With Twitter, with TikTok, with Amazon KDP, it seems to me like it's a TTP, right? This has to be standardized. And this, of course, means that they have to have code, like software code, within the code bases of all these companies to accomplish this. And this is a weakness, because if there's an audit on the code, and I know this is hard to do because of the intellectual property protections, but again, this is a terrorist network, right? I don't think intellectual property protections apply to Al-Qaeda, right? Or to El Cartel de los Soles. So if there is an audit, right, and the FBI gets the code, they will be able to see the logic of how this shadow banning is implemented, right? Across these companies, which shows collusion, right? It will show collusion between all these companies, right? The PayPal mafia, basically. So it's an interesting point. Yes, the other thing is that the note I made about the bird. So this cryptic note refers to a thing called Operation Condor. And I wasn't even born when this happened. I learned about this, through history books, basically. But it turns out that this thing that we're seeing is not new. Like, this has happened before, exactly the same, right? With different degrees of technologization, but it's the same. So in the late 70s, I think it was, there was this thing called Operation Condor, which was basically a terrorist operation created through coordination of multiple intelligence services of multiple countries in South America. And the goal was to basically persecute, kill, and terrorize political opponents that were from the left. So in that opportunity, it was done by the right, by the extreme right of South America, right? So there was a dictator in Argentina, there was 3 generals in Brazil, Uruguay, I think, was also involved. It was 5 countries, if I recall correctly, right? But they came to an agreement to let the intelligence operatives of other countries, of this group of countries, operate without boundaries in this group of countries and in other countries as well. So it's exactly what you see here. That's what you see: Chinese agents working with Venezuelan agents, working with Russian agents, working with Iranian agents, working with Indian agents. You know, it's the same thing. It's the coordination of multiple intelligence agencies of different countries, persecuting opponents beyond their borders. That's exactly what this is, right? But they're doing it at a scale that is unprecedented. Right? Like in the 70s, it was basically done through a small death squads, right? So they would target, you know, a handful of people, or I don't know. I don't want to minimize it. I think at the end, this campaign, from what I understand, right, from what I read, I don't know if this is true, but from what I read, this campaign lasted years, maybe decades, I don't know. And in total, it is estimated that it claimed more than 100,000 victims. Over 10 years, right? Say 10 years, I don't know how long. But it was a long campaign, right? And it had a lot of victims, right? But the most visible victims were, of course, high-profile political opponents, right? People that were political opponents that wanted, you know, democracy or elections, because these were dictatorships, right? So, yeah, so they claim 100,000 lives, more or less. That's the estimate, right? And they did this for years. Of course, now, because of the technology involved, there wasn't internet in that time. Like, they didn't exist, right? I mean, public internet. So, you know, the means of coordination and how much they could scale it was limited by technology. But now, with the internet, the computer vision camera system of the Chinese, and the interception technologies of the Iranians, you know, this thing has exploded, right? To planetary scale, and everybody is a target, right? Everybody that is not part of their network. So that's the difference, right? But the mechanics, the underlying mechanics of this, the coordination of intelligence services of multiple countries operating without borders, this is not something new. This is something that has happened before, right? And, you know, that's why, I don't know, if anybody's watching this, I mean, like authorities or even the judges, you will see that I had a chat with Gemini a few days ago in which I was asking questions about tyranny and why is that most often than not, it is the chief of the intelligence services that end up in power, right? And I don't know, I realized that, I mean, I observed this pattern, right? And it's true. I asked Gemini, and it holds. Like, it produced a list of like 14 people that have been either heads of or prominent intelligence officers and end up being the presidents or the dictator, right? For decades. And you have examples that go from George Bush, who was the head of the CIA, to Diosdado Cabello, who was the head of the military intelligence, to Putin, right? He was part of the FSB and the KGB in that time. I mean, there's countless examples of this. And it's because of that, right? So I mean, this is a longer conversation, right? But and I think I would love to have this conversation on camera, right? But this made me realize, and you can see this in this chat with Gemini, right? I asked the question, what are the pillars of democracy? I know what they are because, this network took me to philosophy classes in New York for almost a year, right? But anyhow, in case I'm forgetting something, right? I asked the question, and the AI gave me the answer. The usual separation of power, rule of the law, the works. But I do not see privacy in that list. So privacy is not considered a pillar of democracy. In fact, in the US, for example, if you give information to the government, it now belongs to the government, not to you, right? So you lose the privacy if you share the information with the government. But this made me realize that, I think, right, and this is a theory that I have, that, somebody that knows about these things should analyze and assess to see if this is true or not. But I believe from what I've experienced, right, that privacy is probably the most important pillar of democracy. Why? Well, because if privacy is violated by these intelligence chiefs, like, Bush or, Diosdado Cabello or Putin, right, at a massive scale, then now they hold leverage over the judiciary officers, the judges, the police officers, the chief of police, everybody, right? So that destroys the separation of power. Because if the chief of police has a mistress and the chief intelligence officer knows it, the chief of police has to do whatever he asks. There's no separation of power anymore, and that destroys democracy, right? So my theory, this is a theory I have, right? I don't know if this is the case. I hope somebody because I don't have any education on this field. I'm just an engineer trying to figure things out. That's what I am. But I hope somebody with education and the skills really and the sharpness to analyze this, sits down or and thinks about this, like, why is that all these people that are experts in violated privacy always end up being heads of state? This cannot be a coincidence. And the other observation, the other realization I had was that the other thing that the other common thread is that not only they take power politically, right, of the entire country, but they usually mix that power with illicit trades, like the drug trade, like Diosdado Cabello, for example, right? Like Noriega in Panama, right? He was also the head of the intelligence, and then he ended up being the head of the drug cartel and the president of the country, right? So according to the AI, it's probably because all these intelligence operations at massive scale need, shadow funding. They need funding that is not accounted for in the parliament or in the Senate or whatever, right? So they need to produce that income, and the way to do it is through illicit trades. Right, so that's the theory. But again, it's just a theory. But I'll talk more about this on the. When I do a real demo, right? But it was a super interesting realization, to see that pattern, right? And to see that nobody considers, in the world and through history, because countless philosophers have thought about, what is democracy and what is, different, not even democracy, different government systems. And this is another realization I had, is that this is not only about democracy, it is about governance in general. Like this is my theory, I don't know, right? I might be wrong here. But I think that even other governmental systems beyond democracy or outside of democracy also depend on privacy. Let me give you an example. The Communist Party of China, right? That is not a democracy by any means, right? And the system that they have and what they're doing, right? This is not a democracy. But what they're doing depends on privacy. And I can give you the proof, an observational proof, right? I only started winning against their attacks after 25 years or so, right? I only started making progress when I started invading their privacy via the informant. When the informant started invading their privacy and telling me information, giving me information, right? Only when that happened is that I was able to defeat their system, right? So this tells you, and that's not a democracy, right? So this tells you that even a non-democracy depends on privacy to work. Because of the same reason. Now I have leverage, or when I capture the database. Me capturing the database, what it really is, if you think about it, is me getting private information of all the members of the network. That's what it was. Financial information, because the crypto payments are recorded there, right? So now I have private information about their crimes, and that gives me leverage, and that allows me to disable them. Well, how? Reporting them to the IRS, reporting them to the DOJ, suing them in court, right? Showing the database, showing the properties, right? But this was only possible through the invasion of their privacy, right? So even for them, privacy is important to maintain their governmental system, even if it's not a democracy. You see? So this is a more general concept that goes even outside of democracy. It's not about democracy versus non-democracy. It's not about left versus right. It is about that for a society to function in a way that there's a separation between a state and individual that is healthy, right? That the state doesn't become tyrannical and crush the individual. The only way for that to work is that if there is privacy, right? If there is a chief of intelligence that knows everything about everybody and you don't know anything about them, right? You're screwed. Like, they have full leverage over everybody. And eventually that leads to tyranny. That's how they take power. And let me give you an example. Greg Abbott, right? I reported Greg Abbott to the IRS, and this is what I'm going to this federal court in 5 minutes, right? This document that I'm going to hold to that clerk has the name of Greg Abbott in the first line of the defendants. Now, I have to tell you, before getting to this point, I reported Greg Abbott to the IRS. And I did this before my son was kidnapped by the state of Texas, right? Using the courts. And you may think, you may fall into the temptation of thinking, well, you're crazy. How you're going to report the governor of a state where you live to the IRS, right? But I have to tell you, I was relying on the premise that report was private. It's not like I reported him and put it in a newspaper. I reported him, I sent this on a sealed envelope using USPS registered mail, which is supposed to be secure, and I'm assuming that he wouldn't know that I'm reporting him until it's too late, until he gets investigated, right? But that's not what happened. He immediately knew that I reported him. And then he took action and sent a team of judges to kidnap my son. So you see the danger, right? He shouldn't have had access to that information, and the danger really is on the fact that he has the power of the entire state of Texas in his hands, and he can yield that power against anybody that he wishes, right? And if you combine that fact with him having information about everybody because he has the Venezuelan intelligence installed in all Texas, it's an explosive combination. He's undefeatable. Who has a chance of defeating him in an election? Nobody, because he will get them out of the way with a lawsuit, with planted evidence, with whatever, right? Harassment, whatever it is, right? So this combination of somebody holding a state power and at the same time having private information that they shouldn't have about all the citizens in that place is what leads to tyranny. That's what makes the system tyrannic. Right? At least that's my contention. So this train of thought started in my head because I was thinking, when all this went wrong, was it when I reported him to the IRS? I don't think it should have been that. I mean, yes, that was the starting point, but that shouldn't have been the starting point, right? Because he shouldn't have had access to that information in the first place, but he did because he has Diosdado Cabello's intelligence in Texas, right? And the Chinese intelligence and all that. So that shows you clearly how it's a super dangerous combination for democracy and in general for any governmental system, that a single person, private person, that holds that amount of power has no boundaries on invading the privacy of the citizens, right? That leads to tyranny, and the individuals become subjects. They're not citizens anymore, they're subjects of a master, right? And in this state, the master is Greg Abbott. There's no other way to put it. And that's why I'm going to walk into that court today.